The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Gates.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, yes, it's on. I give glory and honor to God, who is my Savior, thanking Him for this day and this privilege to stand here in this House to represent the great people of Golden Gates and our nation. Madam Speaker, I rise today to deliver my contribution for this outstanding mid-year budget. Through prudent forecasts, disciplined financial management, and a focus on the most meaningful capital expenditures, we have brought to this Parliament the lowest deficit in over a decade. We significantly reduced the deficit despite achieving many of the items on our ambitious, transformative agenda. But before I go further into my remarks, Madam Speaker, I would like to acknowledge how truly blessed we are as a nation. No man nor woman can take credit for what God has bestowed upon us, which is peace and prosperity that can only come from Him. We must always keep in mind the architect of this universe and this country, through whom we are empowered as leaders to steer this nation through the treacherous waters toward a brighter future for all. We acknowledge His hand in all that we do. The good book warns in Deuteronomy about those who think my power and the strength of my hands has produced this wealth for me. It is that line of thinking that leads to the kind of gross arrogance and pride that comes before a fall. This administration has hit the ground running on day one. We kept our word in turning back many of the ill-advised policies of the Minnis administration that was strangling the economy. As a result, today, our tourism numbers, and Madam Speaker, I'd like to quote a story from ZNS News last night, the 28th of February, that says, Nassau Cruise Port was record-breaking with 28,554 passengers, plus 10,302 crew members on 6 ships, totaling 38,856 persons. Not only are our tourism numbers breaking records, but our unemployment numbers continue to fall. With the economy secured, we took the time to do a lot of the foundational work and policy development to set a blueprint for sustained growth and prosperity. Take a look at Operation Secure, the most comprehensive plan ever announced to address the immigration situation. Our Prime Minister, as well as my ministerial colleagues, the members for Carmichael and Freetown, should be applauded for their efforts. We do things properly in this administration, Madam Speaker. It requires decisiveness and a bias towards action, and it also requires thoughtfulness and planning. Any effective government must strike the right balance. But the Bahamian people don't judge us by our plans, Madam Speaker. They judge us by our execution, our results, and the amount of lives we are able to touch. And we, this administration, would have it no other way. Of course, over the past year, there were policies and initiatives that we would have liked to move along even faster. The reality is that we cannot accomplish everything all at once, but we offer no excuses, Madam Speaker. We're here to get the job done to the best of our ability, and we make the hard choices each and every day. I've seen the passion of our Prime Minister, our Deputy Prime Minister, ministerial and parliamentary colleagues that they bring with them to work each day, and the commitment that allows us to sustain our effort, build on our momentum during our first year and a half in office. Madam Speaker, for the benefit of those who simply haven't been paying attention, let me state on the record what we have done in the past year. Unemployment has decreased from record highs to pre-pandemic levels. In fact, since last year, it has already decreased by an additional 2%. Tourist arrivals are exceeding pre-pandemic levels, and we are on track for a record-breaking year. Kudos to the member for the Exumas and Ragged Island. Last year, we experienced 8% economic growth. Now, Central Bank is predicting an additional 6 to 7% in economic growth for this year. We have hired hundreds of new officers in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, Royal Bahamas Police Force, and the Department of Immigration. We've installed free Wi-Fi on parks throughout New Providence and rolling out access points in our family islands. In healthcare, we have upgraded local clinics in New Providence, and as our Prime Minister would have noted earlier today, the upgrade of 91 clinics is on tap. We have hired more nurses and doctors, and we're securing funding for not one, but 2 hospitals, one in Grand Bahama and one in New Providence. So healthcare in the Bahamas will not be the same after this investment. And Tall Pines, we also see the work that you're doing. After not one home was built in over 4 years under the previous administration, we are addressing the national housing shortage by building dozens of affordable homes and hundreds more are on the way. But that was not enough. We introduced a rent-to-own initiative to expand access to home ownership for those who were financially capable but may not qualify for traditional mortgages. This is a first, Madam Speaker. And the member for Elizabeth deserves all the credit she gets for diligent work in this vein. And just this week, we saw the groundbreaking and launch of the $15 million Golden Yoke Egg Production Agricultural Initiative. Central and South Eleuthera, we see the work you're doing too, and we are excited. Excited, excellent. We are starting off with ensuring that eggs consumed in the Bahamas are produced in the Bahamas. Then we will expand to poultry and eventually hit our target of reducing the food import bill by 25%. This administration is making a $100 million investment in food security. That is change we will see on our dinner plates and feel in our pockets. Of course, within the public service, we paid out double increments across the board and made payments reflecting the increase in minimum wage. After years of union leaders crying about poor engagement from government, we have successfully signed over 15 new agreements. And one today, and more about to be announced, Madam Speaker. 16 and counting. Remember, Zane, remember when they said, Yamakro, that the MOU we signed with the unions before election was a political ploy? What they fail to understand, that we understand, Madam Speaker, is that good governance is the best politics. It is our best interest to keep our word because it's in the country's best interest. In total, $20 million was budgeted for new union agreements, and we were able to keep expenditures below this amount at $18 million. This is the first time ever that new agreements did not lead to huge overspending in the budget, because this is the first time that the agreements were actually completely budgeted for. This is strategic planning in action, Madam Speaker. All of these achievements, and the government has beat its revenue forecast by $270 million while staying relatively on target when it comes to our spending. The booming economy plays a large role in this. We have also the efforts of the Revenue Enhancement Unit and the Department of Inland Revenue to thank for making tax collection more effective, more efficient, and a focus on compliance. Madam Speaker, within the public service, we've taken our commitment to fiscal management very seriously. We're largely on target despite a number of items implemented during the fiscal year that were not initially budgeted for. But for the sake of our public servants, we embarked upon an ambitious agenda with a full understanding that some reallocation would be necessary to facilitate high-priority items. So far for the year, we have spent roughly 55% of our allotted budget. We're requesting an additional 8% increase to cover necessary expenses. As you can imagine, among our major expenses are amounts related to salaries. Compensation of employees widened due to accelerated staff promotions, hiring for new and existing agencies and units, the payment of arrears, confirmations, and reclassifications. For permanent and pensionable employees, we are requesting an additional $1.2 million in funding. We have prioritized these items and are working as quickly as possible to get our public servants the money they've earned. My constant refrain has been, behind each delay in payment and each stagnant promotional exercise is a Bahamian with hopes, dreams, and ambitions. For this reason, we will not stop working until every matter is resolved. We've also funded the return of increments for all permanent and pensionable public servants after they were halted by the previous administration. Within the first half of this budget cycle, we funded the public service minimum wage increase to cushion the impact of global inflationary forces and improve the standard of living for government employees at the lowest levels of the pay scale. All of these activities were not originally within our budget, yet, due to disciplined financial management and strategic reallocations, we were able to stay largely within budget. All other salary-related needs are being addressed through reallocations. The special employment budgets are being reviewed and funds are being reallocated to cover expenses such as the transport expense responsibility budget, which was increased significantly after being historically underfunded, and the domestic travel-related budget. You may note that the allocations for office rent and lease agreements are at 79% and 96% of total budget as of January 2023. These are also chronically underfunded areas. The government is currently carrying out a consolidation exercise, combining many separate agencies into the same premises for savings. In the short term, this has led to increased costs, as 33 previously unbudgeted leases were entered into, and many existing leases were terminated. As a result of this consolidation exercise, we anticipate a savings will be realized in the next fiscal year. An additional $12 million is being requested to account for the new 33 leases, and an additional $7.6 million is being requested to meet NIB finance and operations leases and maintenance charges. The end result of this activity will be long-term savings for the government and improved working decent conditions for public servants. On the 19th of December 2022, the Cabinet of the Bahamas approved the digitalization of records, files, and workflows for the Ministry of Public Service. This is a critical investment in the improved efficiency and effectiveness of the public service as we carry out our mandate as the government's Human Resources Department. Once complete, this exercise will change the way public service works for years to come. The process of digitalization has already been initiated. Considering the accelerated pace at which we are moving, we're requesting an additional $925,000 during this fiscal year. It is listed as consulting services and will be used specifically for the digitalization initiative. These funds are being requested because in the case of digitalization, it is long overdue, and the sooner we can get it done, the better. We cannot wait until the next budget cycle. Other major initiatives within our budget include a request for an additional $11.2 million for pensions. We must take care of our retirees, and that is not an option. With the increase in government pensions last budget cycle, along with additional retirements, not all of which occurred at the projected times, it was necessary to supplement this line item. As can be seen, the vast majority of items are well within the projected amount. Of the additional funding being requested, over 90% is attributable to pensions, rent and lease consolidations, and digitalization. Despite the unforeseen expenses throughout the year as we expedite our agenda, we are largely on target. And in the areas where we have reallocated or requested more funds, these expenditures are associated with essential functions and initiatives within the ministry. We're achieving our imagination of the public service while maintaining fiscal discipline. The common trend among all of our major expenditures is the need to take care of our public servants and empower them to do their best work. We've remained focused, Madam Speaker, on the people. Just ask any public servant who's received increments, those who benefited from the minimum wage increase. I've received dozens of text messages on my phone over the holidays, 78 on Boxing Day alone, from public servants thanking us for the increases and the work that we are doing. The public servants have felt the difference in their bank accounts. And these are not the only people who have benefited from our efforts. Ask those who were promoted, received back pay and gratuities, had long-standing matters resolved, and received long-awaited increases. Ask the trainees of the PSPEP program. We're helping so many people through the work that we're doing in the public service, and we're not breaking the bank to do it. Madam Speaker, our results speak for themselves. This is why I resent the ignorance of those who claim that we've avoided making the hard decisions or the tough decisions. Unfortunately, the person who said that isn't here. But you don't shrink a deficit to the lowest levels in 10 years by avoiding tough decisions. I saw the member for St. Barnabas put out a statement in which he talked about a tax and spend policy. Madam Speaker, only one administration increased VAT to over 60%, and then ran up the biggest deficit in the Bahamas history. I believe that the member for St. Barnabas is aware of who that administration is and who's guilty of that. That is the definition of tax and spend, Madam Speaker. The math is simple. Deficits shrink when the revenues you gain outpace the amount you're spending. Deficits shrink when the revenue you gain outpaces the amount you are spending. If we were spending proportionate to gained revenue, the deficit would not have decreased. Let's be clear, a large portion of our revenue gains are thanks to the robust growth of our economy under this administration, not due to any increase in taxes. But as our revenues have gone up, our expenditure has remained disciplined. We have prioritized to ensure the major policies and initiatives are able to be launched while controlling spending in other areas. And that is how you get the lowest budgetary deficit in 10 years, Madam Speaker. St. Barnabas, I know you learned a lot of lessons as the executive chair of Beaches and Parks, and we all know the stories of the millions of dollars spent over budget consecutively, and there were many lessons there. But Marco City always says, stay in the spirit. So I'm not going to single you out, St. Barnabas, because you were part of an administration that demonstrated a lack of fiscal management. So my point is, no one. So my point is, Marco City and St. Barnabas. Really? Okay. No one from that administration has the moral authority to come to talk about raising taxes or overspending, because you are the poster boys of tax and spend. So now, all of a sudden, there seems to be some experts in managing a budget, and you have the nerve. All of a sudden. And you have the nerve to talk about, managing the budget for the lower income people when your own leader spoke about taking care of the poor the next time. The leader who said that. The leader who said that. Okay. It was. We're talking about the former administration. The leader. The other leader. Competent authority, yeah, he probably knows him as that. It was always next time with certain politicians, but, I see why they make the mistake in thinking that on this side, Madam Speaker, it's business as usual, because that's what it was under their watch. But I have to remind colleagues on the next side, in case they forgot, that it's still a new day. Madam Speaker, over a year and a half ago, this administration hit the ground running, and we've not let up. We have struck the right balance between bringing new vision to government while retaining the necessary experience. While many of our team members may have been new, the vision and values of PLP governance have stood the test of time. With that as our foundation, Our Prime Minister built a team that was capable of delivering for the Bahamian people in a big way. There's no token people or mascots over here. When we brought young people to the table, he put them in positions where they could make a difference. He ensured that women had multiple seats within the cabinet and in positions in our public service. There's no bench warmers on this team, Madam Speaker, and only workers and servants make up this team. As I close, Madam Speaker, I want to remind the Bahamian people that we're only a year and a half into our term. All that we have done so far represents a fraction of what we intend to do. This is only the beginning. Our nation has come very far in the past 50 years, and this government is working with the people to build a foundation for the people for the next 50 years and beyond. Madam Speaker, thank you, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.